Okay, we have episode number 7, which is titled Lonely Among Us. Now, this one originally aired on October 31st, 1987, so on Halloween. And the story was by Michael Halperin, but it was also written by D.C. Fontana. And the director was Cliff Bull. And basically the plotline of this one, the Enterprise is transporting two alien races, the Soleil and the Andecan, and they're being sent to a Federation diplomatic outpost known as Parliament. And these two alien races do not get along with each other. In fact, they request not even being near each other quarter-wise. So you think this is going to be kind of the A storyline of this episode. But actually, what also happens in this episode is that the Enterprise encounters a interesting cloud of some sort, an energy cloud. And Picard orders the Enterprise just to investigate it. And at first they don't notice anything, so they go about their way, but unknown to them, actually there are some living beings who live in this cloud. And when the Enterprise takes a sensor scan, one of the beings gets into the ship's circuitry. And as you can see from this picture, this is the alien being entering Lieutenant Worf, and as soon as he enters Lieutenant Worf, his memory is wiped, and this being is basically taking over Worf's body. Well, Worf is taken to sickbay, and this alien passes to Dr. Crusher, and then it passes from Dr. Crusher to other people in the crew, and it goes from there. Now, finally, this energy being goes back into the ship's circuitry, and as Picard is on the bridge and touches one of the panels, it goes into him. And it's probably in Captain Picard for the longest out of anybody in the episode. And Picard suddenly decides to change course. The Enterprise was supposed to be going to that diplomatic outpost known as Parliament, but then they go backwards, and they're headed back to the cloud for some reason. And once they reach the cloud, Picard announces that he is actually going to beam out into that cloud, because the being inside him has offered to beam Picard's essence and merge with him so that he will get to explore the galaxy in a way that he never has before. So Riker and Crusher obviously object to this, and Crusher relieves Picard of command, but Picard stops everybody on the bridge by sending a bunch of electricity through everybody so he can escape and beam out, energy only, into space. Well, for an hour the Enterprise crew tried to find him, with no luck, and then all of a sudden Troy senses Picard, and she senses that the merging was unsuccessful, and the Picard is actually dying out in space. So that is just in time, because Riker was about to send the Enterprise back to Parliament. So what happens is that the Enterprise tries to use Picard's physical pattern that was in the transporter buffer, because he was the last one who beamed out, to reconstruct the captain, basically. And it's a long shot, but it actually works, and Captain Picard is restored. Now, this version of Picard has no memory of what happened, being possessed by the alien, but he is back, and they proceed back to Parliament. So, this episode has a couple things that I want to note here. This is the second time that we see Colm Meaney in the series of The Next Generation. He was in the pilot episode on the battle bridge of the Enterprise in an encounter at Farpoint. And then we see him again here as a security officer, and we all know that in Season 2 he goes on to play the character Miles O'Brien, who is huge on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Another DS9 reference, Mark Alimo plays one of the Anakins in this episode, but he actually goes on to play several characters later, most notably the Cardassians. He plays Gul Macet in The Wounded, and goes on to play Gul Dukat in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, who was a great character in that series. So I thought I'd note that before I go into some of the criticisms that have been said about this episode. Now, one of the main criticisms about this one is its similarity to the original series episode, Journey to Babel. And that is because the writer of the original series episode was also D.C. Fontana. She did quite a bit of writing for the original series, and the criticism was that she just copied off of that and plunged that into this particular episode. And interestingly enough, the original story by Michael Halperin did have a different subplot. It didn't have the delegates going to Parliament. It had a plot involving a problem with dilithium in the warp drive of the Enterprise. But that was changed by D.C. Fontana into this particular episode. So that was criticized, and even the director said that the subject does affect the product, and there were better written shows. Will Wheaton watched this many years later and felt like it wasn't written very well, especially his character. Some of the dialogue wasn't written well. He claimed that D.C. Fontana was at a convention at some point, and the title was How to Address the Wesley Problem. And he said, well, instead of being part of that panel, what D.C. Fontana should have done is write better dialogue for him. So that was part of the objection to D.C. Fontana, and she said that it's clearly a distinction between this episode and Journey to Babel. There were two different reasons why we had these delegates. So she denies anything being wrong with how she wrote this episode and what she did. Now, another criticism by one of the critics of this episode said that it was similar to the original series in the third season. And as you remember from the original series, the third season, it was made very cheaply. The whole original series was made pretty cheap, but the third one was really cheap. And they're comparing it to the third series by saying that this episode looks cheap and appears to be written by a child in a yellow crayon. So obviously he didn't think too much of it. And another thing that happened around this time, on November 2nd, 1987, around the time it had been seen by fans, a lot of people wrote in criticizing the apparent cannibalism on the part of the Antigons in this episode, as they're looking for food. Now, I just have to say, I think the criticism for this episode in general is just going a little bit too far. It's not the greatest episode ever, but I was really entertained by it, honestly. There's actually a segment in it where Lieutenant Commander Data is actually gets an idea from Picard about Sherlock Holmes and trying to solve the mystery about what's happening to the ship. And he grabs a pipe and studies all of Sherlock Holmes' cases and does a little impression of Sherlock trying to figure out this episode. And I thought that was pretty funny, and I think it's important that they showed that, because in later episodes they build on that idea with Data being interested in Sherlock Holmes, as you'll see in future episodes. So I thought that was entertaining. I felt like the main storyline with the energy being possessing the crew, I thought that was pretty fun. I know that's not the most original idea in the world, but I think it's, the way they portrayed it was really good. The writing may not have been the best for this episode, but I think Cliff Ball did a great job in making sure that he made the best of what was written. So I was very entertained by that, and it had kind of a sinister look through it, this mysterious energy being possessing Picard, Crusher, and Lieutenant Worf. So I thought it was an interesting episode. Maybe the storyline that D.C. Fontana wrote in there wasn't the most interesting, although it did have some comical moments, but I think this episode gets a lot worse of a rap than it deserves. So that is Lonely Among Us. Stay tuned for the next episode, which is entitled Justice. Thanks for watching, guys.